I have taken one of Destiny's most broken builds that's been around for quite some time and amplified the build to the next level. If you thought the classic Arc Soul turret build on a Warlock was good, you haven't seen anything yet. With this build, we're not only going to be having an Arc Soul turret with a Stasis turret that's melting everything for us, and trust me when I say that these turrets are already carrying you through the hardest content on its own, but combining this with the new Praxic Blade sword and 2 new artifact perks, we'll be able to take this build to the next level. Think of it like being a tank that doesn't die, but your turrets are killing everything for you at the same time. Because of the way this build is designed, we will have 5 major buffs. We'll have Infinite Radiant, Infinite Devour for Infinite Arc Souls and Stasis turrets, as well as health on every kill. We'll have Infinite Restoration for constant health regen. We'll have Infinite Amplified for a speed buff and mobility. And we'll have jolting effects with Bolt Charge, which hasn't been possible before to be consistent on Prismatic without relying on specific perks in a gameplay loop. Now, we'll be jolting targets with our Arc Souls and generate the stacks by just dealing damage to those jolted targets, which means we don't have to use arc weapons, we can use our sword. Not only will have a buff from almost every subclass, we're also generating faster supers and Transcendence and infinite special ammo so that we can run double specials too. With this much jolting going on, overloads most definitely won't be an issue anytime soon. Our sword obliterates barrier champs, and unstoppables will just be stopped regardless. This is the most busted, disgusting build I've seen for the Warlock that literally destroys endgame content like there's no tomorrow. It's that good that any boss fight or any group of enemies just don't stand a chance. Sometimes you can't even reach the enemies to attack them because by just walking towards them, they're already dead. So guys, before we break this build down and go over everything, be sure to leave a rating, comment, subscribe and share for more, and now let's cause some serious chaos. Roll the intro. Okay, now guys, I just want to clear something up because this has been misunderstood a lot lately with how the Arc Souls damage stacks with the grenade stat. So just to be clear here, the more stats in your grenade stat means the more damage your Arc Soul turret does. When using lower than 100 stats with the Arc Soul turret, we're getting the base default damage values, which is 25, and this is on ultimate difficulty for testing at the shooting range. Now when we have our stats at 199, I'm just short of 200 here, we're getting a buffed value of 40 damage, which isn't too far off double damage. So by having that grenade stat to 200 or close to it, you're maximizing your Arc Soul's damage potential, so that is the #1 priority. Make sure that the grenade stat is as high as possible, but not higher than 200 because that's the cap. The second thing I want to go over is another major part of this build, and that's the Bolt Charge. Normally you can't easily get Bolt Charge and Jolt effects stacked with Devour along with Restoration and Amplified, because I just don't think it's possible without the help of external sources. And what I mean by that is by having things like a weapon perk such as jolting feedback, or anything that can jolt or give us that initial Bolt Charge stack. So running around with Arc Soul turrets without jolting enemies isn't that great. The damage is good, but the area of effect isn't. So to counter this, we will use the Facet of Dominance Prismatic Fragment, so that the arc grenade jolts targets, and again the Arc Soul does count as a grenade, so it will jolt targets and then therefore clear the room really quickly. But what you might not notice is that we'll get that initial Bolt Charge stack from this, and that is important because that triggers a new gameplay loop that you wouldn't have otherwise had before that could combine with this exact setup. So in the artifact we have this perk here where rapidly defeating arc debuff targets grants Bolt Charge. So we have the fragment with the Arc Soul that makes the first Bolt Charge since it's jolting stuff and killing it, and then that's all we need because onwards from here any attacks on jolted enemies will increase the stack of Bolt Charge, and because of that it means we can use our new Praxic Blade sword for damage that will be able to melt things quicker with the help of Bolt Charge when it reaches the maximum stack, which is pretty strong as well. So when it comes to damage, you have your sword, you have enemies being jolted all around you, you have an Arc Soul and a Stasis turret freezing, slowing and dealing damage, you have Bolt Charge and infinite ammo, so enemies around you will just die whilst you're focusing on boss damage. It's such a clean, neat, overpowered setup that just obliterates everything, and it's not even just that, you can get the Transcendence so quickly with this setup since you have your Arc Soul and Stasis turret gaining the energy, and you can fill that bar up quickly with the sword since it's a kinetic weapon. When you do become Transcendent, you're best swapping off the sword so you can actually throw the grenades and use the abilities. But the main way you will use this build is you'd first activate your Arc Soul turret and just kill enemies. That's literally as simple as it gets. But in a live environment that's max difficulty and pretty much max pain, It's the same thing, activate the turret and kill stuff. When you have a strong, hard hitting enemy like a chicken shooting at you, you need to be careful because a few hits will just insta-kill you at that sort of difficulty. So guarding with the sword is the best case to block the damage and reflect it back whilst the arc sword turret does all the damage. Just make sure that you have an arc sword up at all times. Now with the subclass, you want to make sure that you are a prismatic subclass with the Song of Flame super. Then for the abilities, we have a Healing Rift, an Incinerate Snap melee, and then an Arc Storm Grenade. For aspects, you want Feed the Void, so that defeating enemies with an ability, that being from our Arc Soul, will then activate our Devour, and Devour will just refresh upon any final blows, giving us health and grenade energy, which means infinite turrets and grenades. The second aspect is Bleak Watcher, so that we can throw down a stasis turret that slows and freezes enemies alongside our Arc Soul. And if you're wondering where the Arc Soul is coming from, it's coming from our exotic arms for Getaway Artist, where you convert your Arc Grenade into an Arc Soul and become amplified. That's why you need a Storm Grenade on, and pairing this with Bleak Watcher just means we'll have both turrets down at once. You can only have one Arc Soul at a time, but it does last a stupidly long time. But with these stasis turrets, if you're quick and consistent, you can actually end up with about 5 of them down at one time. It's quite insane. Now the 4 important fragments you want are Facet of Purpose, so picking up Orbs of Power grants us Restoration due to being on a solar super. Then Facet of Dominance, so our Arc Grenades jolt targets, but the Arc Soul will jolt them as well. You're not actually going to be using the Arc Grenade itself. Then Facet of Courage, so our Arc Soul does more damage to enemies affected by the Stasis turret. I did test this, and it isn't too much, so if you want to swap it out you can, but I generally like the plus 10 to the grenade stat. But for the last fragment we have Facet of Command, so freezing targets reloads our weapons, and will create some stasis shards and void breaches. Again, you can swap this out if you want to, but I do like the instant reload, specifically when it comes to doing damage to bosses, because a stasis turret will freeze the boss occasionally, so we'll just constantly reload our weapons every couple of seconds. For our loadout, we do have the Praxic Blade sword, which you can get from the Fire and Ice exotic mission during the campaign. Then I'm running an Arc Rocket sidearm, along with my Eager Edge sword for mobility to get around quickly. Make sure that on the Praxic Blade, you have this defensive form on, so that blocking will give you special ammo. That's just so that we can keep our ammo economy maintained for this sword, so we don't run out of ammo. For the artifact, we have Expert Handling, so our swords gain guard resistance, Elemental Siphon, so rapid kinetic weapon final blows creates an elemental pickup, Power from Pain, although you don't really need this one on. Then we just have this one here, so that we can create more ammo bricks. We also have this one, so that defeating arc debuff targets grants Bolt Charge. This one is a must have, and probably the only main one you really need. But we do have a combination Argent Blade to buff our sword, Singularity Blade, and this one should work since we have Devour constantly, so our sword hits should weaken targets, and then Sword Storm combo along with Void Infestation, which are the last 2 you ideally want. As for the stat distribution, you want Grenade first, then Super, then Class or Weapons. And this works pretty smoothly because our current armor drops for Grenadier drop with Grenade as the primary and Super as secondary. Same with Specialist and Gunner. They all drop with the stats that you would want, so you can even mix them out if you want, as long as your Grenade is ideally at 200 or close to it first. Lastly for mods, you just want mods that will increase your special ammo generation, as well as mods that produce orbs of power and helps maintain that grenade to get it back faster. So make sure you have those mods slotted in, so you can have a higher uptime with the grenades and the sword ammo. But overall, this build is probably my favourite new fun build to use right now in Destiny 2 Renegades Season 28 or Season Lawless. If you guys like this build, then you might like some of my other builds, all of which you can find in the playlist down below or over on my Mobalytics page. So go check them out later if you want, otherwise I'll see you guys soon for the next video. Take care guys.